That's fine.
Okay, so today, guys, we're going to discuss the topic and concept of wants and needs in your everyday life and how different people have different wants and needs and how they value them in life. So we're going to use the Venn diagram to distinguish the difference between wants and needs and then what sometimes wants and needs share in common. So let's label this wants, and you guys are going to do the same thing on your own Venn diagram. And we're going to make a list, brainstorm a list together. Wants and needs. Okay. So thinking back to your own life, what are some things that you want in life? Can you raise your hand when you guys have a thought? Emily?
I want a cell phone.
Okay, cell phone. That's a good one. Katie?
I want a horse.
Ooh, good one. That would be pretty nice. Okay. And now, oh, yep, Emily?
I want a TV for my bedroom.
TV. Anything, can we try and think of one more for wants? Katie?
I want an iPad.
iPad, okay. Now what about needs? Something that you need in life. You have to have.
You need water.
Water, that is quite important. Alright, what's something else that we need in life? Katie?
Food.
Yep, food. Another crucial thing.
Could food be in the middle? Because sometimes I want food, but I also need food too.
That's a very good point, Emily. Sometimes we want things, but they really are necessities in life. We can't get through life without them. Food.
But I always want water,
You always
but I
want-
need it too. So can that go in the both
That's
too?
exactly it, yep. You can't get through life without water. Your body needs that, but a lot of times we crave water, like when it's really hot out, you're really thirsty. Okay, what about another need?
Clothes could be in both too, because you need clothes, and I love
Yes.
clothes too, and I want them.
Good. So we're seeing a lot of these can kind of cross over both lines and be both wants and needs. All right, what about one more?
I have a question.
Yep.
Well, I might need a cell phone to call my mom,
You might need a cell phone.
But you could also find a phone somewhere else. Like if you're at school and you need to call your mom, you could go to the office. Or like there's also public phones too.
So maybe expand that from cell phone to phones in general. We need some sort of phone to communicate
yeah, so you
long
need
distance with
communication.
people. So phone, and then we'll put in parentheses communication. But I like that thought, Katie. Okay, so looking. Oh, yeah, Katie, do you have one more?
shelter. Like a
Shelter.
house.
That is key. What would we do without a house?
Be cold.
Be cold. All right, so now looking at this list. So for wants, we have cell phone, horse, TV, and iPad. For needs, we have water, food, some form of communication, maybe a phone, and shelter. And then a couple of these intersect into both categories like clothes, food, and water. But in general, separating the two lists, what do you notice about the wants versus the things we need?
You can live without the things that you want. Like
Right.
we don't need a TV or an iPad or a horse to live, but you
Right.
need water and food to live.
Right, so some things maybe we desire and really want to have, but we can get through life without them.
Yeah.
So today we're
All right, boys and girls, today we are going to read The Great Kapok Tree by Lynn Cherry. This book is about resources, so on the back of your Venn diagram, I would like you all to write down resources that come up throughout the book that you can think of, all right? Two men walked into the rainforest. Moments before, the forest had been alive with the sound of squawking birds and howling monkeys. Now all was quiet as the creatures watched the two men and wondered why they had come. The larger man stopped and pointed to a great kapok tree. Then he left. The smaller man took the axe he carried and struck the trunk of the tree. Whack, whack, whack. The sounds of the blows rang through the forest. The wood of the tree was very hard. Chop, chop, chop. The man wiped off the sweat that ran down his face and neck. Whack, chop, whack, chop. Soon the man grew tired. He sat to rest at the foot of the great kapok tree. Before he knew it, the heat and howl of the forest had lulled him into sleep. A boa constrictor lived in the kapok tree. He slithered down its trunk to where the man was sleeping. He looked at the gash that the axe had made in the tree. Then the huge snake slid very close to the man and hissed in his ear, "Senor, this tree is made of miracles. It is my home, where generations of my ancestors have lived. Do not chop it down." A bee buzzed in the sleeping man's ear. "Senor, my hive is in this kapok tree, and I fly from tree to tree and flower to flower, collecting pollen. In this way I pollinate the trees and flowers throughout the rainforest. You see, all living things depend on one another." A troop of monkeys scampered down from the canopy of the kapok tree. They chattered to the sleeping man. "Senor, we have seen the ways of man. You chop down one tree, then you come back for another and another. The roots of these great trees will wither and die, and there will be nothing left to hold the earth in place. When the heavy rains come, the soil will be washed away, and the forest will become a desert." A toucan, a mascot, and a cock of the rock flew down from the canopy. "Senor," squawked the toucan, "you must not cut down this tree. We have flown over the rainforest and seen what happens once you begin to chop down the trees. Many people settle on the land. They set fires to clear the underbrush, and soon the forest disappears. Where once there was life and beauty, only black and smoldering ruins remain." A bright and small tree frog crawled along the edge of a leaf. In a squeaky voice he piped in the man's ear. "Senor, a ruined rainforest means ruined lives, many ruined lives. You will leave many of us homeless if you chop down this great kapok tree." A jaguar had been sleeping along a branch in the middle of the tree. Because his spotted coat blended into the dappled light and shadows of the understory, no one had noticed him. Now he leapt down and padded silently over to the sleeping man. He growled in his ear. "Senor, the kapok tree is home to many birds and animals. If you cut it down, where will I find my dinner?" Four tree porcupines swung down from the branch to branch and whispered to the man, "Senor, do you know what we animals and humans need in order to live? Oxygen. And Senor, do you know what trees produce? Oxygen. If you cut down the forest, you will destroy that which gives us all life." Several anteaters climbed down the kapok tree with their young clinging to their backs. The unstriped anteater said to the sleeping man, "Senor, you are chopping down this tree with no thought for the future, and surely you know that what happens tomorrow depends upon you today. The big man tells you to chop down a beautiful tree. He does not think of his own children, who tomorrow must live in a world without trees." A three-toed sloth had begun climbing down from the canopy when the men first appeared. Only now did she reach the ground. Plodding ever so slowly over to the sleeping man, she spoke in her deep and lazy voice. "Senor, how much is beauty worth? Can you live without it? If you destroy the beauty of the rainforest, on what would you feast your eyes?" A child from the Yanomami tribe who lived in the rainforest knelt over the sleeping man. He murmured in his ear, "Senor, when you awake, please look upon us all with new eyes." The man awoke with a start, Before him stood the rainforest child, and all around him staring were the creatures who depended on the great kapok tree. What wondrous and rare animals they were. The man looked about and saw the sun streaming through the canopy. Spots of bright light glowed like jewels amidst the dark green forest. Strange and beautiful plants seemed to dangle in the air, suspended from the great kapok tree. The man smelled the fragrant perfume of their flowers. He felt the steamy mist rising from the forest floor, but he heard no sound, for the creatures were strangely silent. The man stood and picked up his axe. He swung it back in his arm as though to strike the tree. Suddenly he stopped. He turned and looked at the animals and the child. He hesitated, then he dropped the axe and walked out of the rainforest. Did you guys like that story?
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys find that were resources that the book talked about? Katie?
It talks about shelter a lot.
It does talk about shelter. How does the kapok tree provide shelter to the animals?
Well, like the birds and everything live in the tree,
Mm-hmm.
so that find shelter, and any animals who live on the ground maybe would mind that it was raining or something.
Very true. What did you think of, Emily?
I also said shelter, but the book also talked about like food and oxygen being good resources, and how the tree and flowers and other plants provide not only food but like oxygen and pollination, so other things can live, and how everything depends on one another.
Very good. This book actually has a map at the back of it. And it shows all these different animals. So if we look, we can probably point out a few animals that depend on one another, like this jaguar. What do you think how does this jaguar get fed? Like, what does he eat?
Other animals?
Very good. So say he eats, what's one of the animals that he can eat? This little guy over here, the violet-tailed sloth. He may eat that, but he's eating a leaf. So how does he eat the leaves?
Well, he needs the leaves to survive, while the jaguar needs to eat other animals to survive.
So what would make this leaf grow? You mentioned in the book, you kind of brought it up too.
Well, if it was a leaf of a flower, then maybe the pollination.
Exactly. So we can see how the bees help pollinate, the pollination helps grow trees, which helps us live, right? 'Cause what do we need to live?
Oxygen.
And then the leaves also feed him, and if without the leaves he would live, and if he wasn't here, the jaguar wouldn't have food. So it all is a big cycle.
So is that kind of like how humans from people from other parts of the world depend on each other? So someone who lives in South America might need something from North America to live?
Exactly, and that's why we have trading and other things like that to keep us connected to the rest of the world, so that we can all have what we need to live. Miss Rickard, is going to now discuss some other things about wants and needs and how this book goes back to what we talked about a little while ago. Wait, aren't they doing their sound?
I can just cut things out inside.
Okay, we'll start that. I would like you guys all to pick a resource, either from our earlier wants and needs list or that came out of this book, and write 3 to 4 sentences about what it is that you chose and why you chose it, as well as what you could do to try to help, like, preserve this resource that may be leaving.
still have a few more minutes, so if you guys finish up early, feel free to draw a picture. Maybe illustrates how you can help out with your environment. One more minute and then we'll share what we wrote. Okay. Alright guys, so let's talk about what you guys wrote about for how we can help with the environment. So Emily, do you want to start?
Sure. I said that one of the resources that we need to preserve to help the environment and people is food.
Okay.
And,
how can we do that?
well, the book said that all plants, animals, and people rely on one another.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking maybe people could, like, plant gardens so they can grow food for themselves and animals.
So fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, and also, like, even, like, plant flowers and,
Right.
like,
Other plants that
yeah, that are needed.
Okay.
And-
Perfect.
And to help, like, other people, like, in the community, you could even, like, go to food pantries and help, like, give food to people who need it.
Do you mean provide or just help distribute at the place at the
Yeah,
food
or
pantries?
and provide it.
like some canned goods that we do
Yeah.
at the school? The canned drives? Okay. So provide extra
Food.
Food. I like that. That's very generous. Alright, Katie, what did you have?
I did oxygen,
That's another important one.
because we need it to breathe.
Yeah.
If we can't breathe, then we can't
Right.
live.
Yeah.
So it's
That would be a
important. And something that helps oxygen is the trees.
Yep.
So I said that we could do things like not cutting down as many trees, maybe recycling paper more, so that we can reuse it instead of having to cut down more trees.
Okay.
Um,
Did you say recyclative or reuse?
recycle.
I like that too.
And I also talked about how if I was writing something, I could use the front and back of the paper, so I use
Very
this.
good. I know. Think about each piece of paper that go to waste in school every day, even printing homework sheets, lesson plans, even just articles for you guys to read.
Yeah, we should always put those in the recycling bin instead of the
Sure.
trash.
We should. because we have our second bill, but we really could probably use it a bit more because we mainly use it for like our plastic bottles. So it's just a good idea, Emily. Okay, so I want to go back to our beginning of wants versus needs and the list we made in the Venn diagram. Do you remember we talked about how the wants or the needs in life were all based on natural resources, and that the wants in life were mainly artificial? And do you guys remember what the difference were between these two terms, artificial versus natural resources? Katie?
Does artificial mean like someone made it?
Right, so it means it has to be made or produced by a human, so we'll just call it man-made. And then what about natural resources?
Those grow in the environment, and
Right.
humans don't need to make them.
Right, so can be found within the earth environment. Okay, so like we said, food and oxygen are two of the most important natural resources that we use, both animals and humans use to survive. And there's a few other key natural resources that we may have touched upon in their Venn diagrams. Can you guys think of any other important natural resources that play a role in our lives?
Water.
Water. Okay. Water. Good. And I'll just add over here food. Obviously food. Okay, and then we had trees. Anything else?
Is oil
Yep, that's a good
and
one.
gas?
Oil and natural gas. Yeah, so these are a few key sources that we need in life. And the problem that we kind of touched upon in the rainforest book is that it's important to keep these resources preserved, and that what was the man trying to do in the book? How was he affecting their environment, or going to?
He's gonna cut down the tree.
Right, he was going to cut down the tree. And what do trees provide us?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. So if the tree got cut down, do you guys know what trees consume for us so we get the proper oxygen? They consume a certain gas that's not good for us.
Is it carbon dioxide?
Carbon dioxide. So the process when they cut down trees is called deforestation. So by cutting down all these trees, they're actually limiting our oxygen because now CO2 is being produced because there's no trees to absorb it. So we really need the trees throughout all parts of our life because it's not only in relation to oxygen, but what else are trees used for?
Shelter.
Shelter, so building homes and even furniture. What else?
Paper.
Paper. So there's three main resources: paper, wood supplies for shelter, and oxygen that we need the trees for.
So the natural resource makes artificial resource.
Exactly. So a lot of times these are artificial resources that we want, and sometimes we may need, are majority based on come from natural resources found within our world. So people don't realize how important it is to preserve these because they provide such a crucial function for developing other elements in life. So we talked about oxygen and trees. Do you guys know what the current issue is with water, preserving healthy water and clean, fresh water in the world?
Is it something to do with the oil in the water?
Yeah, oh, you took the oil rigs? Like the oil spills from the
Yeah.
rigs? Yep, so we can just say pollution in the water. So what's happening is, we talked about the animals that live within the environment of a rainforest, but then we have a whole other environment of species of animals that live within the water, in the ocean. So what's happening is, these oil rigs are traveling from coast to coast in order to transport fuels to other areas, which we'll talk about in a second. And what happens is sometimes these oil rigs leak within the ocean, and it causes a lot of damage. It builds into the water, so it pollutes the water, and which can get into the animals, and sometimes the oil actually gets on the animals and into their insides and can really do damage, and sometimes it kills the animals in the ocean. So it's really important that we make sure that these oil rigs are, one, properly built, or if we can even decrease the amount of oil rigs that cross the ocean, because it's a great risk every time a big oil rig goes out to travel. And off of that, so I talked about how oil rigs have to go transport oil from one place to another. Why do you think that is?
Is it because of trade?
Trade, yeah. So this is the new term we'll be talking about more in our next lesson. But trade is, what can you describe what trade means to you? Is that like when people trade goods and resources that they need or that they don't need anymore to other places so they can get things that they need? Right. So it's all about kind of a balance of what you need and what you have. So oil is produced because the natural resources, they're kind of scattered throughout different parts of the world. So an area that maybe is known to have a lot of oil, like out in the Middle East, maybe by Saudi Arabia, they have a lot of natural resources of oil near them. But maybe over in Asia, they lack that resource. So that's when the oil rigs come over and help transport oil over. And in return, perhaps, what do you think maybe another continent could trade in return in general? Like what's another, in order for oil, what's a supply that maybe they could provide to the other country?
Maybe like trees, like wood or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wood.
Out
Because
in the
Saudi
Middle East,
Arabia,
they don't have very many trees.
that's a very good point, Katie. So we use our environment as natural resources to provide for others what other areas lack. Like Katie said, there's not many trees, so they need the lumber and paper products that maybe they can't produce on their own. So is that like how everyone in the rainforest and the great kapok tree relied on one another? People throughout the world rely on one another. Right. That's why it's so important for us to have proper or good communication throughout the world, because we don't realize it, but we really need help from each other all around the world for resources. And the main cause of that is because of the trade systems that we have established. So using what we kind of learned today about resources, natural and artificial resources, we're going to go into the topic of trade tomorrow and realize how important it is to provide communication between other areas and how we can benefit from helping each other. Okay, so you guys can put this in your folder and then we'll head off to lunch.